Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode 105. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. Thank you so much for listening. As you may recall, we are celebrating 100 episodes of Hustle and Flow. And so we have a special message, a special recording today from Amy Wang, sharing her favorite episode and what the podcast has meant to her.
Hi, my name is Amy Wang. I am an environmental attorney in New Bern, North Carolina. I don't know that I can actually pin down a favorite episode of Hustle and Flow. They've all been so applicable. Probably the biggest impact that Heather has had overall on my practice in a mid-sized law firm is helping me to learn to establish boundaries and plan. I'm an organized person by nature, but I've always struggled with meaningful planning. And her planning system over time has helped me to really get control of my life, all multiple facets of it, and really feel like I am making progress in my career. Her planning extravaganza set me on a new path to freedom, and the Life and Law Planner for 2019 has been a godsend. So thank you, Heather Joy Hubbard. I love having you in my life, and I'm glad to be able to share this experience with you.
Thank you so much, Amy, for recording that, for listening to the podcast. And you don't know how happy it makes me to hear that the planning extravaganza and the Life and Law Planner has made such an impact on your life. It really does mean so much to me. And for those of you who don't have a Life and Law Planner, heads up, I'm not really sure when this recording comes out where we will be, but we are down to the last 100. So now is the time to purchase if you haven't already. You can buy those at lifeandlawplanner.com. We'll also put a link in the show notes, which you can click right from the iTunes description. Okay, let's get to today's topic, which is all about how to create and maintain a prospect list. Now, this may sound simple, but I get asked this question all the time. Every single mastermind, whether I'm doing individual coaching with my annual mastermind, whether it's in one of my group coaching with my other masterminds, or just in Instagram messages, Facebook messages, anything like that, I'm often asked if I have templates related to prospect lists. And I don't necessarily, because it really is dependent on the approach that you're taking. But that said, again, I get asked for it all the time. So I have created one. Now it's generic, but I have created one for this episode. So again, the link will be in the iTunes description, but you can also go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/105, and you can download this Excel prospect list. If you're already on my email list, you are just going to get it delivered straight to your inbox. But if you're not, you'll have to go and download it. But I want to walk through it with you today. Now, before I even begin, I want to talk about when and why would you even need a prospect list? And some of you, I would assume most of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you may not. So I'll just kind of explain what we're talking about here today. And a prospect list is merely people, companies that you think might be a good fit for your services. Now, generally, this is from a sales perspective, but you could have a prospect list from a networking, mentoring perspective, as well as from a job-seeking perspective, okay? These work in many different ways. It simply means that you are wanting to build a relationship with someone who can potentially provide value to you in some way. Of course, it's not all about taking, because part of the nurturing is that you're going to provide value to them, but that's how you identify those that you would put on your prospect list to begin with. Okay, so when is the best time to create or come up with a prospect list in your career? Well, the answer to that is yesterday. Seriously, I don't care if you are a first-year associate and your job is not to even develop business. You should still be working on this concept of what a prospect list looks like. And again, for you, it doesn't mean that you're trying to even get business this year, but having this in mind is so important. I truly wish that people would have explained to me in law school how important it was to maintain and nurture relationships with my law school classmates. It really never occurred to me that that could somehow benefit me. And now looking back, it's just, so frustrating to know that there are so many more relationships out there that I would have had I kept that prospect list or created that prospect list and nurtured those relationships. Okay. So we'll break this down more, but again, it's just the concept of having relationships that you're trying to nurture, and we'll say for mutual gain. Okay. We'll say for mutual gain, but the truth is there is a belief that they may be able to provide value to you someday, whether that's in the form of directly hiring you, of being a referral source, of being able to recommend you for something, hiring you, any number of reasons why you would want to maintain this prospect list. Okay. So you can get started today, even if you are a first-year lawyer, and even if you're not in a firm, right? Unless you are in a company or a position where you plan to never leave and you somehow have guaranteed control over your future, which is no one, it's helpful to have a prospect list. Okay, so many people ask me, well, how many people should be on my prospect list? There is no magic number here. No magic number. That said, just use a little common sense. If we're talking 3 to 5 people, you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. Probably not a great idea. On the other hand, if you have 500 people on your prospect list, you're probably going to have a really hard time actually nurturing all of those relationships. So casting a really wide net without being able to form deeper relationships, that's counterproductive as well. So again, no magic number, just use a little bit of common sense. And that mostly relates to there being enough that you have a decent network and a decent ability to pull in what you need when you need it, coupled with not having so many that you can't actually work the list. So what all goes on a prospect list? Again, it really is dependent on your situation, but with the generic form that I am providing you, it's quite simple, okay? You want to start with name, and then you want to have the company, and then you want to have contact information. You might do one for phone number, one for email. You can put it all together. Doesn't really matter, whatever is easiest for you. I personally like to add cities because I very much have a national network. Yours may not be. In that case, you wouldn't need that column. And then last, notes. This, again, is the most basic generic prospect list you would have. But my point is, don't overthink this. It really doesn't have to be complicated. As long as you have their name, you know where they're working, you have their contact information, and you have a place to, capture your notes related to that person or when you talk to them, that is sufficient. You can do this in an Excel sheet. Yes, you could have a fancy CRM software system, but you don't need it. You don't need it. What's far more important is that you work the list, right? Having the list means Nothing. It's working the list. So whatever format is going to be easiest for you to work the list, that's what you want to go for. And that's why you don't want to keep all of these notes in different places, right? So you don't want notes for each individual in a different place because you're never going to really remember who you're supposed to be following up with when. That's the biggest mistake that I see people make is when they're doing networking, when they're going to conferences, when they're speaking, when they're doing all of these things, they meet people, but they don't do anything else with it, right? So maybe you're collecting business cards and maybe they get into Outlook. Maybe they go into your contact system. Maybe you're putting them on a firm newsletter, but otherwise that's it. Collecting the information alone without doing anything with it is not going to help you. So again, make this usable and workable for you. And if that means that the more complicated the Excel document gets, that you're not going to use it, then pare it back and go with something really simple. So in that same vein, you want to create your prospect list so that when you sit down to do your prospecting, everything is right there. It's super simple and you don't have to think too hard about it. Because if you have to think too hard about it, you're just going to procrastinate. You're not actually going to do it. And that's why you have the contact information on there. You only want as much contact information on there as is needed to do whatever you're going to do. So if you occasionally send snail mail and you are the one writing out the address, okay? So one, it's assuming snail mail, and two, it's assuming that you're the one writing it out. That's really the only time you would need an address written in the prospect list. You have the phone and the email there so that when you go to do something, right? Like if you go to send them an email or you go to pick up the phone, there is literally nothing else that you need to go to. You don't have to get in your contact in Outlook. You don't have to go to anything else. You've got it right there on that document. And it allows you to just really move through that list because a lot of people have a little bit of trepidation and fear around outreach, even if it's nurturing relationships. And so if you give yourself any kind of permission or excuse to put one more step in there, you won't do it, okay? So trick yourself by having everything ready to go. Okay, so then the next piece, it's the notes. And the notes can serve a few functions, but the main thing is just to help you recall details about that person, because depending on how long your list is or how good your memory is, you may forget things. And the other is to know when was the last time you talked to them or what was the last touch. And for this, you can keep it really generic and just have that one big notes column and basically schedule time to come in and review your notes to decide when to update it, when to do additional outreach. Or you can get more detailed with it. In fact, if you want to be a little bit more advanced, you could almost do a sales funnel within your prospect list. So if you missed episode 20, I talked about the concept of what a legal sales funnel would look like. Now, typically it's a little bit automated, but you can still use that concept as a way to systematize your business development efforts around prospects. So for example, you might think through a 15-step approach for your prospects. And it's completely unrelated to the prospect itself, okay? So you would think this through on the front end. And let's just kind of walk through what a few of those examples might look like. Okay, so step one may be sending a handwritten note. Okay, so this is assuming it's a brand new prospect. You just meet this person. Step one in your prospect funnel is send a handwritten note. Okay, and then step two is to send an email following up on something that was discussed, right? So maybe you had something related to a personal conversation or something about the business. And so you noted that in your sheet. And when you send that email, you know that you are simply going to touch base and say, how did that go? Or ask something else. So that's step two for you. It is just an email following up, touching base on something from that initial discussion. And then maybe step three is scheduling a coffee, reaching out for coffee or lunch, something like that. As you can see, this can keep going and going and going. I'm just kind of throwing things out there off the top of my head, but you would make it unique to what you want to do. And so you come up with what all of these touches look like, and you can go ahead on the front end and even say what that schedule is going to look like. So this could be, it could be a 2-year plan, but you have the steps mapped out. So in that sense, you would have a column for each one, and it's just a matter of, when you come to your list, you say, okay, what's due now? And you simply put an X for it being done, or you'd write in a note of how you did it. So that truly takes out the need to think through what is the next step for you. Not everyone likes that approach, and not everyone is going to take the time to set it up. And again, if you're going to use setting up one of those systems to procrastinate and not have a prospect list at all, don't do it. Keep it simple. But if you love systems, if you love to be efficient, and you're like, that's brilliant, I don't even have to think it through, but I know I'll actually be doing the follow-up and nurturing that otherwise I don't do because I am always like, well, what do I say now? It's been too long. Then a sales funnel in your prospect list is a great way to go. And if you have it scheduled, if you have it mapped out, so let's say, step 1 is supposed to happen within 1 week of the prospect coming in. Well, then you probably want to go ahead and schedule in your calendar once a week that you're sitting down to even look at your prospect list, right? So that's going to trigger the deadlines. So that one would go out. And then you already know, because it would be at the top, that column 2, step 2, is supposed to happen in, again, I'm just completely making something up here, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Then that would already say 2 to 3 weeks. So as soon as you send that letter out, your handwritten note, you would look and see, well, what's the next column? You would see 2 to 3 weeks. You would look at the date and you would just write the date in it. You don't even have to calendar it, because if you're coming back to the prospect list once a week, then you can just look at all the columns to see, okay, what dates are up this week? That's the work I have to do. Just really makes it simple. It systematizes it. Again, if that's overwhelming for you, don't do it. Just keep your notes. Another thing that you might want to consider, depending on how detailed and systematized you want it to be, is to use tabs. So basically, using worksheets within the workbook. I know some of you hate Excel, but the Excel file itself is going to be your workbook. And then there's always just one sheet, but at the very bottom, you can name it, and there's a little plus button. You can add new. I call them tabs. Those are different worksheets within the workbook. So you could have a cold list, a warm list, and a hot list. And if you do that, you're probably going to have different schedules or different intervals on when you're following up with that prospect. So if it's a cold lead that you think has potential, but it's a longer play, or it's just not as obvious, or you don't think there's as much to gain from it, but you want to continue to nurture it, then that cold list you might only reach out to, and again, it depends on your circumstances. It might be once a year, twice a year, once a quarter. So maybe it's someone you met at a conference, right? Well, you might put them on that cold list, and then if you choose your schedule on your cold list to just be twice a year, then what you would do is you would just reach out sometime in the middle of the year after the conference just to touch base to say, hey, I was thinking of you, just wanted to touch base. How are things going? Right? Super casual. And then when you get close to the conference again, you would see their name on there. You would reach out and you would say, hey, curious if you're going to the conference again. Even if you're not, curious if you're going to the conference again. I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm sure going to miss, seeing the people there, including you, right? It's just another way to have a very genuine conversation and it not feel forced. So, and again, just making this up, I'm not saying it's what it should be. If you're doing 6 months on your cold list, then again, you're going to check in once a month on it, and you're just going to see who's up within that twice a year range. You would go ahead and write down when it's going to come up again if you're doing every 6 months. Your warm list might be prospects where you've had a relationship for a little bit. Maybe you're feeling like you're in the friend zone. That was episode number 52, if you missed that. That's where you You feel like you've got a good relationship going. You feel like you're even becoming friends, and yet they never send you the work, right? That's what the friend zone is. So it's a warm prospect. You think that there could be something there, but you're not sure it's going to happen anytime soon because they've not really given you that kind of sign that they're going to send work your way. That too may be a quarterly touch, right? Or probably isn't going to be 6 months. It's going to be more than that, but it could be 6 months. Again, it depends on how much time you have and the approach that you're taking, but it's probably going to involve a different strategy. So it may be a more aggressive schedule. It's definitely probably going to be a different strategy because you're not just trying to have, casual conversations at this point. If you're wanting to move them into the hot list or to move them into a client, you're probably going to have to change your approach and start to ask for the business. Of course, that's an entirely separate episode. It's a bit of an advanced topic, but your approach is going to need to be different. Okay, so then if you have someone that's on your hot list, that means that you're genuinely having conversations around having them hire you. And that then becomes about closing the sale. But if you just hope that it happens without having, some type of schedule to reach back out and to touch base and to really to close the loop, they may end up going somewhere else, or the issue just lingers on and on and on, right? They need the legal work, but it's not like they want to do it. So if you don't stay on top of them, they're likely not to commit, right? So that's what the hot list looks like. So that's one option. Again, you don't have to do this. Don't overcomplicate it if that's going to mean you don't work it. But it's an option to have a cold, warm, and hot list on different schedules or with different approaches that are basically already mapped out. Okay, another option would be to have different tabs based on the type of prospect. So it's not really whether they're warm, cold, or hot. It's what you are looking to get from that. Okay, so you might have, for example, a tab on referrals. You might have a tab on clients, and you might have a tab on introductions. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. Sometimes, someone isn't necessarily a referral source or a potential client, but they're so well connected. They're great at making introductions. They're someone that you may need to turn to for any number of reasons. It's important to keep them on your list so that you're nurturing that relationship. Because when you go to make an ask or, to ask for a favor, it's important that you've talked to them recently and it doesn't come out of the blue, because people are really busy and they would rather engage with someone that they're already having an ongoing relationship with than someone that they haven't heard from in forever. And if you're doing this, right, from a referral perspective as well, because you can get a lot of work that way, keep in mind that there's a difference between external referrals and internal referrals, especially if you're at a really large firm. So you might have two different tabs on that, right? So you might have external referrals, and that's probably going to be other lawyers. And then you're going to have internal referrals, and that may be other partners. Associates, take note. You can go ahead and do this too. It's about building relationships. So if you want a wide network in your firm, whether that is to have great contacts and have political support when you're up for partner, or whether that is having them send you their referrals as opposed to someone else, whatever that is, they too are prospects for you. And I think we often forget about that. So having them on your prospect list as someone to make sure that you are reaching out to occasionally, that you're having conversations, especially if you have a lot of different offices, to make sure that you're emailing, you're having phone calls, you're at least seeing them, going to their offices, if they're at your office, right? It's just really important to kind of keep track of this. Otherwise, we all get so busy. It's really easy to just assume that you will do these things, but they never happen. It always is, you've got great intentions, but it gets put on the back burner. And relationships are so critical. They are so important to every aspect of your life and your career that it really is worth setting aside some time, at least once a month, if not every week, to be nurturing. Well, we won't say working your prospect list, but to be nurturing your prospect list. So again, this does not have to be complicated. It can be as simple as you want it to be. And if there's other information that you want to keep handy, that you want to collect, that you think would be relevant in your conversations with people, then go ahead, add a column, make it your own. But if you want just something to start with that shows different examples, you can get that download. Just go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/105. And the Excel sheet I have has all of the different examples. So you would basically be deleting as opposed to adding. The key is to make sure that you're actually doing something with it, because the prospect list alone is not going to be helpful. It's all about using it, working it, nurturing it to make sure that those relationships not only grow and deepen, but move you forward in getting closer to whatever value it is that you're hoping that they can provide one day. If this has been helpful, if you are always into my marketing and my sales episodes and you're really into business development, I do want to give you a heads up that we are continuing to focus on masterminds this year. And it looks like our next mastermind is going to be for mid-size attorneys, mostly senior associates of counsel partners. And the focus will be on developing business. We're mostly looking at firms that'll be about 25 to 75 attorneys, although there are some high-end boutiques that are smaller than 25 attorneys that still will fit in that category. And then we're going to be doing a one-day mastermind. So that's for those of you that really want a deep dive on getting clear on your brand, your marketing, your sales, getting feedback on that, but you're not really needing the accountability or the support to execute and to keep going deeper, right? You just need one day to kind of get things going. We are going to be doing that as well. So if you go to legalmasterminds.com, it's probably not updated. When this comes out, it probably will not be updated given how much we've got going on. But if you scroll to the very bottom of the page, there will be a button that says submit an interest form. That's what you want to submit, because we are going to that list first and foremost. In fact, we may not even update the website if we get all of the spots filled with those who have already submitted. If you've already submitted an interest form, we've got that. If you haven't, be sure to get that in. And if you're interested in that one day, you can even note on there in any of the questions that are asked, you can say, I'm really interested in the one day. I love teaching this stuff. I love helping people get clear on their specific strategy. So if you are interested in either the 6-month mastermind as a mid-size attorney, or you're interested in that one day, just strictly business development, that one's going to be really limited in size. Or if you're just hoping that there will be enough people similar to you that the next mastermind after that we start will be your particular group, be sure that you have submitted that interest form. Again, legalmasterminds.com, and there will be a link in the show notes, which you can also access from the iTunes description. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. I am super excited to announce that the Life and Law Planner is officially here. It is more than just a calendar. It is a full planning system. If you want to take back your days, your weeks, your months, and your year, order your planner now. It will completely change your life and help you accomplish your biggest goals. There's only a limited quantity available, so go to lifeandlawplanner.com and order yours today.